Crowd already engaged here tonight inside the blue line.
Along the wall, centering pass off a skate, long ahead this goes, break play, going in, Byro, scores!
We'll play some hockey, eh? Hockey, we're gonna play hockey today!
Yano for it, he'll wrap a shot on a goal, and gets his first goal of the season. Running out of the air, wow, going in,
Crowd already engaged here tonight inside the blue line.
Along the wall, centering pass off a skate, long ahead this goes, break play, going in, Byro, scores!
We'll play some hockey, eh? Hockey, we're gonna play hockey today!
Yano for it, he'll wrap a shot on a goal, and gets his first goal of the season. Running out of the air, wow, going in,
Welcome back to the Daily Hockey Show, Milan-Cortina, presented to you by Fortune Tire USA. We are back. We had a big game with the USA. Whatever, that was a beating. But Canada versus Finland is what people want to hear about. My God, Chris. What a run of emotions. Stuff we talked about on this show happening in the game. Give me your thoughts, and then we'll let me just...
let you just rant or opine or
yeah.
Or,
I have some former
heat.
NHL stars that I'm gonna unfortunately say negative stuff about.
Yeah. So hey, here's the thing that was fascinating about today is that, you know, we had two semifinal games, obviously very differently played. I think you got to give Finland a ton of credit. They got out to the 2-0 lead, and then you got to give them no credit for sitting on that lead in a way that didn't really allow them to play a style that kept Canada at bay at all. And so that ends up costing them. They give up the goal late. There's, you know, complaints from some of the players and some former players, which I know you're going to get into later, about, you know, some of the officiating. There was a late penalty. High sticks are one of those automatic things that are going to get called. You got to keep control of your stick. Maybe McKinnon sold it a little bit more. In the end, they get the penalty, and McKinnon scores the game-winning goal. And now you've got Canada through to the gold medal game in a game where, it felt like it could have really gone the way of Finland. And Finland is a team that when they do get a multi-goal lead, it is really difficult to come back against them because they tend to make the game really difficult. And I thought in the early portions of the third period, if they had played more of the second period that way, they may have actually found a way to get another goal. So in the end, Canada finds a way, as they so often do. And we go to this just remarkable gold medal game that's coming up between USA and Canada. And we will break that down today, but we've got another show tomorrow. We're going to spend a lot of time on that gold medal game. So if you want to get some really in-depth info previewing that game, you'll want to join us again tomorrow night. And there's a lot of other things going on too, but make sure you're there for that. But Babs, I want to turn it back over to you because just let's get to the emotional
first
turmoil
before I start ripping into people.
on.
Yeah. So I was watching the game with my hands in my head. You know, we started off with the hard hitting line is what John Cooper went with, but he swapped Marchand for Hagel. But I said, hey, Tom Wilson, Sam Bennett, like run them against Finland's top guys. Let's get going early. Like let's get things to be a little bit more aggressive than we've seen in previous games and allow you to be the ones driving the edge. And I think I brought up, hey, Canada really needs to clog up the neutral zone, stuff like that. Well, Finland listened to part of it and said, hey, we're just going to play neutral zone trap. And Canada listened to part of it and said, hey, we're going to get aggressive early. But Sam Bennett got a little too aggressive. Crashes the net. I understand what he was doing. He was expecting a rebound. And that's why he drove as hard as he did. And then he just goes, I'll try and see. He's a guy that gets away with it. He just didn't get away with it then. It could have cost his team the game. So that was unfortunate. The shorthanded goal, I mean, the best sequence for that player in his entire career. He ended up being one of the highest searched players on Elite Prospects. People are like, oh, who's this guy? Anyway, that hurt. But Canada starts to, get in the motion. You and I talked about this. I said, hey, I think there's a good chance that we are going to see Sidney Crosby in between periods in the locker room getting the boys going. Well, guess where Sidney Crosby was? In the locker room, talking to the guys, still being that leader. But to say I was composed would be the complete opposite of what really was going on there. I was stressed. I had my hands in my head just going, oh my God, this cannot be happening. But The players get it done. I wanted to highlight the fact that it's very cool that pretty much everybody on the team high fives every single person hanging off the rail, and you see them do it in a row. I love seeing that. I actually watched guys not do that in the AHL last year, and it was one of those things where I go, should I make a video about how distasteful that really is? Because all you have to do is raise your hand up, and it means something to some players to do that, and they make an effort, and other players, they don't. But when I saw it in the AHL, I go, these people are literally paying your salary. Like, you can't be doing that type of thing. So it's awesome to see the best players in the world make sure that they do that. However, Chris, should I talk about the tweet today? Teemu Selanne, a guy that I had a lot of respect for, but Teemu Selanne says one of the dumbest things I've seen a star player say associated with this tournament. I will read it out to you. He stated, beating the greatest hockey country in the world and Canada, referees, same night, is impossible, I guess. Absolutely embarrassing penalty, 90 seconds to go in an Olympic semifinal. What a joke. A high stick to the face is a high stick to the face, and it will be called 100% of the time that it is seen. And it was a clear high stick. It hit him right in the face. Teemu, you played in the league. If you think this shouldn't have been called, man, what were you doing today? Because I don't know. That's insane. And you agree 100% of the time that's a penalty?
Oh yeah, it's a penalty. I mean, I think there was definitely, like, if you're going to complain, about the officiating, and we talked about this in the show the other day, and we talked about how if they are Canadian refs for the Canadian game, people are going to say things about that. And sure enough, they did. But they went with all NHL crews. There was an American and a Canadian in the U.S. game, so not a full Canadian staff as there was this last time. I did think that was interesting, to say the least, about that. But so I understand the frustration there. But yeah, it's a penalty. And the other thing is maybe you say, okay, well, hey, like McKinnon totally sold that. He didn't get hit hard enough.
He didn't get, but he got hit. He got hit though. That's the thing, is he did the theatrics.
Did get hit, but you can anytime you throw the head back, like we've seen it before where they're like, oh, you're both going because, but I mean, it's still a penalty.
Yeah, he had to hit the ice. Yeah, then we're talking he flopped, but I don't think he was a fish in that situation. I think that was reasonable enough, and they're going to call it. It's the same thing as if someone trips somebody, they're going to have to call that. Maybe they're not going to call it a little bit of a higher hit or, something close to the boards that might be maybe interference. They're going to call the major infractions, and that's what a high stick is. If I had to cut them, I mean, then what are you talking about, right? So that's a 4-minute penalty, and it was close enough. Like you could have seen a cut in that situation. So, yeah, they're going to call that all day. It's not like it hit the visor, it literally hit the face. So that was insane. I'll get your opinion on this first because you're not biased. Tying goal, goaltender interference, yes or no? A lot of people just said, hey, he got pushed into him. Like that's the fault of the defenseman.
Right. So the short answer is I thought it was too close to challenge. I agreed with them not challenging it because if you challenge, you lose the challenge, you get a penalty, and now you're out of it. You're out of the game. I think that would have been tough. The one thing, and I believe it was Marty Baron tweeted this, former goalie himself, and he said he thought that Finland still should have challenged it because Marchand does go into the crease on his own, but he is knocked over by Erik Haula into the goaltender. So that is, that contact would have been very difficult, but the burden of the goalie interference, you're dealing with NHL refs, but you're dealing with, potentially NHL/IIHF video review booth, and the rules are slightly more rigid when it comes to a player being in the crease. And so that is where there could have potentially been that argument. In the NHL, no chance. Like no chance. That's a goalie interference. I think that, Haula's contact was the biggest thing. So for me, that call didn't bother me at all.
Yeah.
In terms of them not calling goalie interference. And it's just one of those things where because there's a penalty, it's just such a hard call to challenge.
Well, it really bothered Joel Armia, and he went out and made a statement. It makes you wonder what's in the water sometimes after the games. If guys are just, they say stuff. I didn't think it was goaltender interference whatsoever. I understand that he went into the blue, but also you can't push players into goalies. Otherwise, guys would be doing it constantly anytime they thought that there's a chance that the other team might do something. So it's an annoyance. It's an annoyance, I think, for everybody involved in the games because they keep going, oh, this again. Like, what are we doing? But Timo Solani's comment is utterly insane.
It's emotional. It's emotional. Like,
Still,
you know,
it's a garbage statement. I gotta be honest with you, Chris. But you know what isn't garbage, and what you should rely on is Fortune Tires. Fortune Tires on FloHockey. Whether driving to the rink or cross country, find the nearest retailer at FortuneTireUSA.com, and we'll break down the USA game after the break.
Everyone knows that standing still doesn't get you where you want to go. It's all about movement and progression, power, safety, innovation, expertise. On the road, off the road, and down the road. You have to expect more out of yourself, and you should expect more of the company who makes your tires. Getting you more miles, traction, and safety is why we get up in the morning. Let's drive forward. Expect more. Fortune Tires.
All right, we're back. We're back. Wow.
We're back.
Yeah, we are. USA wins the game against Slovakia. Slovakia looked skittish off the start, a little stunned in some ways. They also targeted Slav before the puck even dropped. 3 cross checks. And I'm like going, oh, this isn't good for Slovakia. I know it really wasn't. They were stunned. They kind of kept it close, but when they had their chances early, they did not capitalize, and then it all went downhill.
It did, and I think their biggest problem was that USA came with their best game, and that was clear from the puck, the drop of the puck, is that the US was ready to play a very dominant style game, a game that they were pretty committed to from the very beginning, and I think that was evident. The Dylan Larkin line had 2 of the best statement kind of shifts that you could have asked for in the first period. They were creating chances, keeping pucks in the zone, and then eventually Larkin pops in the first goal and really kind of opened things up for Team USA. And then, really Slovakia was hanging in there for a good chunk, but the U.S. started to pull away. Jack Hughes gets involved in the game. Jack Eichel gets involved in the game. And then now it's away from you. And Slovakia was getting frustrated. The one thing, there were a couple things that I didn't like about this game from Team USA. One of them was a lot of minor penalties early in the game. Not something you can get into with Canada. You got to be really clean in terms of how you're going to play, essentially between the whistles. I'm sure there will be things after the whistles. But either way, I think that USA played some of their best hockey here. You got everybody kind of involved and everybody going. And the one, aside from the penalty trouble, the other thing I didn't like is that Tage Thompson, looked like he got a little bit banged up there towards the end of the game. Didn't look like he was going to be available, but he had that great goal earlier in the game. Hopefully it's just precautionary. I'm hoping we'll learn more about his status here in the next little bit. But Tage Thompson has been a really good player for Team USA. So I like the depth of the U.S. I like the way that they played. And one thing that I think is really important in this one is that they are starting to kind of surge a little bit. They've played the last, 3 games they've played, I feel, have been their best games overall. And now they've really played what I think was probably their best game, aside from, the lulls at the end of the game when it was already out of hand and they gave up a couple of goals. So really good position to be in as they head into the gold medal game.
Yeah, I think I brought this up a couple times, is that the U.S. was going to start having more calls against them as the tournament went on, and that their leeway on some stuff was going to start to run out. We saw it. That's what was happening, is the officials went, no, like enough is enough on some of it. So the standard better just be brought through that we saw out of the Canadian game, more so than not the standard that we saw in the American game, where they were, if it's clear, we're gonna call it. If there's nonsense, we'll step in. But like, for the most part, can you guys just please be adults? And there was a lot of yelling during the Canada-Finland game at the officials, some bad offsides and stuff. But the penalties they called were penalties that needed to be called, and they didn't miss anything. So I think if we can see a similar thing in the gold medal game, allowing these guys to get physical with each other, some of the after the whistle stuff, it's stupid when you give 2 guys roughing. I understand what happened at the end of the game, where they kicked the Kachuk brothers out because you don't want the disaster to have happen. So you end the possibility of said disaster. But Brady grimacing, if we can pull the photo up in the slideshow here, you'll see Brady not having a great time throughout. So that there is players that are beat up. Brady had injury issues throughout the year. That's a real grimace. So
yeah,
not ideal if you're Team USA between that and Thompson, where we were watching him walk back, skates off and everything, and he looked very frustrated. So we'll see what's going to happen there. We also don't know the status of Crosby because they won't tell us. So, is Crosby going to play? There's a good chance that both countries are going to play with a somewhat depleted lineup one way or the other.
Yeah, I mean, if Thompson is out, that brings, Kyle Connor back into the fold. We'll see where that all goes, but certainly, this is the nature of the tournament. There's a lot of things that are very difficult that you kind of have to go through, and we'll have to see exactly what's going to happen with Tage Thompson. But I think you've gotten really good performances out of Connor Hellebuck. I think you've gotten great performance out of your D-core. Charlie McAvoy continues to be a menace. Quinn Hughes continues to do things with the puck. You're seeing Zach Werenski make plays. I mean, I just think that there is a lot of things clicking right now for the U.S. team. And I think it took them a little while to get into this tournament and get their feet under them. And I think they've gotten it there. And that's where, I think you got to take some positivity out of it. Also in this, another key factor, and we'll talk about it later, is, just the fact that the U.S. was able to really stretch their bench of this game. They didn't have to play Quinn Hughes his normal ice time. They didn't have to play, their top lines within a rotation. You could even give guys extra shifts off if you had to. Clayton Keller got to be more involved in the game as a result. So lots of good things come from that. I do think the day of rest, when you play in the World Championship events, a lot of times, like the World Juniors and other things, it's semifinal, you play right away. Tomorrow we have just the bronze medal game, and then there's the gold medal game on Sunday, which will be at 8 a.m., I believe, Eastern time. So that's an early start for us all, but I have a feeling a lot of people on both sides of the border are going to be wide awake for that one.
Yeah, they do it because the NHL wants the players back. So they get them.
And the closing ceremonies.
Yeah,
too.
so they get them all out of there. They could delay it, and they would get more viewers. It's an unfortunate thing that they have set it up that way, because it's not fan friendly. I remember falling asleep during the Russia gold medal game. So Not ideal.
Well, that was kind of a boring game in the end.
Yes.
So
it's tough to say what the U.S. is necessarily going to do because they've got the flexibility of how they can play this roster in a few different ways. Canada is more, I would say, set up in a certain way, but the United States can kind of move around their lineup a little bit more than you can see on the Canadian side, where Team Canada, like I said, there was points where I'm like, hey, Coop, can you change something? We haven't seen that so much out of the United States. It's been more steady. Hughes obviously playing out of his mind on the back end. His speed against Slovakia really showed that people weren't able to keep up whatsoever because he was either retrieving the puck or making moves in the offensive zone, and there's just guys end up flat-footed because they're not able to make an adjustment to stay on track covering him. So, Hughes is the Hughes brothers actually as a whole is going to be probably the X factor for the United States going into that game. The Tkachuk brothers, obviously super valuable, but I think this will be more of a battle of who's zone entry and who's able to pick up pucks behind the net faster. I think that's really going to be the decider. So, yes, Connor being available too is another extraordinarily talented player. So, Thompson out. Yes, you maybe lose a guy who sitting there, he can wire pucks on the power play. He can wire pucks, period. But that goal he had was an unbelievable short side goal.
Just a seed.
Yeah, it was a bullet. So they tried to build Team USA to play against Team Canada, but it kind of looked like they were very good to play against every single country other than Sweden, really, which they end up beating in the end. But Sweden being the kryptonite, it was the strangest of all of the Team USA games we've seen thus far, Chris. So I don't know. I don't know what you can draw from that.
Yeah, it was interesting. I'm not sure exactly, what to make of it. Because I think USA carried play a lot of the time. I felt like they were the better team for most of the game, but really, the thing is that you can have that pushback from teams and you got to respond to it. And so, I think Canada is obviously going to get their chances, and that's going to be the key thing is I think scoring first is going to be so critical.
Yeah.
That just feels like it means so much in that game, and who controls the momentum and other things like that. And obviously, everybody's kind of trying to establish themselves, but I think I read a little bit more probably into Canada's last two results than I do that one for the U.S., just because I feel like there have been instances where Canada has had to rely so much on McDavid and Macklin Celebrini and Nathan McKinnon and putting those guys together on a fairly regular basis, which now all of a sudden, McDavid and McKinnon and Celebrini had 25 minutes in the game, in a regulation game.
Well, good thing Celebrini is a young lad, so he can handle
it. That's good.
Yeah,
yes.
And
that's
Connor
helpful.
McDavid's also a bit of a workhorse. So we've seen that play out just fine. McKinnon, though, that's where I start to get a little nervous. But after the break, the Four Nations face-off rematch is here. We will not see guys dropping the gloves, but we will see a very competitive game. But we'll break that down right after the break, which is presented to you by Fortune Tires on FloHockey, the official tire of the AHL. Find your nearest retailer at FortuneTireUSA.com, and we'll see you in a few.
Everyone knows that standing still doesn't get you where you want to go. It's all about movement and progression, power, safety, innovation, expertise. On the road, off the road, and down the road. You have to expect more out of yourself, and you should expect more of the company who makes your tires. Getting you more miles, traction, and safety is why we get up in the morning. Let's drive forward. Expect more. Fortune Tires.
back, and we're going to preview Canada versus the USA, which goes down Sunday morning at 8:10 a.m. Eastern time. Chris, what is your read on this game?
Well, I mean, I think we're going to see a really great matchup, obviously. I mean, you've got two of the best teams in the world that you could have possibly assembled at the exact right time. And so, yeah, you've got, unfortunately, Sidney Crosby unlikely to be available. Well, we can't say that yet. We don't know if he'll be available for that game. And then you've got, some of these other players that could be injured. But in the end, I think you've got two great, equally matched teams. The margin for error in this game is so slim. I think it's going to be a situation of who flinches first more than anything. And, we'll probably get more into the nitty gritty of the stats and the various things in tomorrow's show. But really for today, you just look at there are two big factors for the U.S. that I think are very critical that they have now that they didn't have at the Four Nations. That's Quinn Hughes and Charlie McAvoy. And really, they didn't have Matthew Tkachuk in the championship game because he was pretty much injured the whole time, so couldn't play. So you've got those guys back. That changes the dynamic of your entire team. It changes the dynamic of your blue line, and it changes the ability of who you can put out in the most critical moments of the game. And so that's big. But then you lose Crosby on the other side. Now, I wish we had both teams at full strength, everybody healthy. I don't want anybody to have any excuses for how things went this way or that way, because these teams are too darn good to have that. So I think we're going to have a generational gold medal game on our hands here. I think this is going to be something that rivals 2010. I think this is going to be something that rivals 2002. This is going to be one of the greatest gold medal games we have ever seen.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think there's a way for it to go more Canada's way, and it will result in not an exciting game. And it is the 1-3-1 neutral zone trap. So you have three guys fall in the center line, defenseman back here, and you have one forechecker, but you have them not go too deep. John Cooper was not the coach of the Tampa Bay Lightning when it was a perfect system that got eventually blown dead because no one was going for the puck. But it makes it very difficult for guys to go in transition. And if you start to hit players on Team USA over and over and over again, we have seen guys like Austin Matthews kind of disappear in games a little bit. The Tkachuk brothers start to get really agitated. The 1-3-1, having them to just battle through that neutral zone will give Canada the ability to play more of their game by playing the opposite of their game. It's one of those funny things where you can force things to go your way by being very annoying. You saw Finland also basically start doing this. They had their forechecker go a little bit deep. They were more aggressive on it, but they were dropping everybody back. And because of the smaller ice, and people are saying, oh, it's not that big of a difference. You have to think of a player's radius and where they can move their stick. If your radius stays the same, but the ice becomes smaller, guess what? You're going to be able to cover more of the ice. So it makes it even harder to push through. And the difference on the side, like in the width of the ice, is that space sometimes. So we heard European players complain about the lack of space. We've heard the NHL guys say, hey, yeah, it feels pretty normal. No, they're lying. Did you see how often Finland was trying to make sure that Binner could not play the puck? It was an active tactic for them because it's so easy for the goalies on this ice to grab the puck and then just dish it back out. And then you're just playing a game of chuck-a-puck, basically.
Yeah, and that's no fun. So yeah, so you're the fun police here. You and your 1-3-1.
It works, police. You have the best players in the world. You can run the trap even better because Canada has some of the best defensive defensemen in the world. And then you're just counterattacking.
Yeah. Well, that's honestly, I think the matchup that I'm most intrigued by is probably USA's forwards versus Canada's D in terms of the forecheck and how if the U.S. can establish it, because that they did that against Slovakia. They struggled mightily to do that against Sweden, and that's why there was a big difference in those two games. And I do think that there is, with Josh Morrissey out, and we'll see if he's available for the gold medal game. Hasn't played since the first game. If he's available, that definitely helps in that department, because I do think that there are, Shea Theodore scored a big goal today, but that's a player I would be concerned about if I'm Canada in those settings. I'd be concerned about Colton Parayko despite the size. I think that there are some guys that are going to have to, really be ready for a different pace of game. And that's where things are going to get interesting. When it does come to potentially clogging up the center ice, I do think that the U.S. has a number of players that are good at fighting through those kinds of things, and that's both the Hughes brothers. Eichel is very good on the zone entries. You have some other guys that can use the brute force. Larkin has speed. There's a lot of guys that can beat you in a variety of ways. But I still think that this U.S. team has, if they can really establish that forecheck, that is probably the key to them having a chance in this game. On the Canada side, I do think that the Tom Wilsons and Sam Bennett's and Brad Marchands are going to be a factor in the game. And I think that loading those guys in, like, Sam Bennett took that ridiculous penalty earlier today. It was bad. It was a bad penalty. John Cooper put him right back out. Right back. There was no benching. There was nothing there. And they put him right back out. And so there is going to be havoc in this game, havoc within the Olympic setting, but I am fascinated to see the impact that those guys have, because they are going to go after all the players that you think they're going to go after, and they're going to go after them real hard.
And Canada has last change, so that's where I think they can be the more, because they're going to try and put the Tkachuk brothers against Celebrini, McDavid, and McKinnon. Well, Canada has last change on that, so you keep running your guys back out there, and you can sort of nullify that. But if you're Canada, you got to hope for a lot of offensive zone faceoffs, and you got to pray that the faceoff guys dial it back in. Canada's supposed to have a lot of guys that are known for being able to win the draw, and they did not. They were losing a lot of faceoffs. At one point, it was 70-30 in favor of Finland. You cannot be hitting at that type of rate, especially when you left certain players at home who are known for being really good on the draw. You can't be doing that. So guys really have to step up in that sense. And Sam Bennett needs to drive the net. Hellebuck is a guy who we have seen get shaken in big games repeatedly in the NHL. It's been a problem for him. So don't drive the net that hard, though, but drive it enough where you're getting in their head. But Canada's got their line of agitators, and the U.S. has their line of agitators. Just the differences and why I think people are worried about it is the Tkachuk brothers just yap on social media and in the games way more, so it makes them seem like a bigger thing. But Sam Bennett does the exact same stuff. Brad Marchand, while smaller, does the exact same stuff. Tom Wilson, he's kind of crazy. So like there is a counter answer to basically everything. They go, oh, shooters, like, Team Canada's got McDavid. Well, US has Austin Matthews. You battle it all out. This should be decided by like Nick Suzuki and Brock Nelson.
Yeah, Brock. Yeah. But be nice. Yeah, Brock Nelson and his bubble that he's been.
Yeah, they only brought one, so McAvoy had to give it to him because he was more hurt.
Yeah, exactly. They only traveled with one, but there's some other stats I wanted to throw out too while we have a second. Just Canada has the best power play. They're 7 of 16 on the power play for a 43.7% power play, and then USA has the best PK. 15 of 15. They have not allowed a power play goal. So special teams will be a factor, and that'll be a very interesting stat to track. I don't think there'll be a ton of penalties, but I do think if that, Canada's power play versus USA's PK is going to be another great matchup.
Yeah, and also the United States, just in terms of power plays they've gone up against, I think it's been a little bit different. Like you see the power plays that we watched Slovakia have, and there wasn't really anything going on there. They were they were bad. So that helps pad that 15 number. Sweden's power play did not look what I thought they'd be disgustingly lethal throughout this tournament. They actually were a pretty big surprise to me with the lack of them that they had. They usually that's usually a good factor for them. You look at Germany again; it's shut down 2 guys, and then they don't really have as much to work with. So the United States' matchups, I think, have been a little bit easier than the matchups Canada's necessarily had to go through, because the seeding has made this a little crazy. Like, it's been difficult to work through if you're Team Canada versus Team USA. Well, they have played good teams still. They haven't had the cutthroat games. And I think that momentum Canada's had by not scoring early and also having to fight for it in the third sets the vibes very good for Team Canada. And the U.S. is coming off a game where they felt like they're the man. And apparently John Tortorella was laughing on the bench, and that was alarming to some people. So you don't want to see that happen. Fortune Tires is the official tire of the AHL, built for every drive, every season. Find yours at FortuneTireUSA.com. And then we're going to preview the bronze medal game. We'll see you guys in a few.
Everyone knows that standing still doesn't get you where you want to go. It's all about movement and progression, power, safety, innovation, expertise. On the road, off the road, and down the road. You have to expect more out of yourself, and you should expect more of the company who makes your tires. Getting you more miles, traction, and safety is why we get up in the morning. Let's drive forward. Expect more. Fortune Tires.
So the bronze medal game, a game that you don't want to be in. If you're Slovakia, you're kind of okay with being there because no one thought you could be, but it's a giant letdown going out of today. Chris, what's your analysis on Finland versus Slovakia?
Yeah, obviously disappointing not to be playing for gold, but I think both of these countries coming into this, if you gave them the opportunity to play for a medal, they would be happy with that, especially Slovakia, having been in the bronze medal winner last time. Finland won the gold a time in the last Olympics as well. Pretty much nobody on this team for Finland was there, but obviously Juraj Slafkovský has experience winning an Olympic medal. To do it with NHL players does mean more to them, and so they've got a tighter turnaround than Finland does. They played the late game. They'll get back. They do play tomorrow. So that is the tough part about this, is that you're also dealing with short rest. I think probably Slovakia could have started preparing for the bronze medal game about midway through the second period of this game today, whereas Finland was kind of stunned. And I think both teams are going to come into the game angry. And that's an interesting place to be. I think that, a lot of people have said that the bronze medal is the hardest medal to win. But I think at the Olympics, it's a little bit different. I think the opportunity to win an Olympic medal is not lost on these players. And especially the ones from Europe. I do feel like they have that sense that this is an important thing. And I think, if you gave Sweden or, Czechia the opportunity to trade places with Finland and Slovakia, they would in a heartbeat. So playing for an Olympic medal matters. These two teams have already played against each other. They did play the opening game of the tournament. Slovakia got the win. So Finland won't forget that either. And I think it's going to be really difficult to beat Finland twice.
Yeah, I think the Finnish are coming in a bit of a different tone. I think they're also going to realize that they can't sit back because it didn't work. Now, you're not sitting back against Slovakia is different than sitting back against Canada. We all know the difference between those two. But Slovakia does have guys who can shoot, and you have to evaluate, is the rest of the roster going to be able to do too much, or can we really focus on Safkovsky and really shut down that line with Dvorsky, really make it hard for them to get anything done, and then can we go play our game and still win? The Finns should be able to do that realistically, given the roster discrepancy between NHL and talent on one side and the other. Finland should be able to do that. The fact that they didn't to start the tournament was actually a really big surprise to people. So you're going into a game. The previous games actually don't matter. So what happened yesterday impacts Saturday, but what happened last week doesn't matter anymore. I think you still have to give the edge pretty significantly to Finland. And yeah, it's just, that's what it is with this tournament. If Canada was going for a bronze, I'm assuming the attitude's a lot different. But when it's Slovakia, it means more to them because bronze is a failure for Canada, but it's not a failure for Slovakia.
No, this is a giant step forward for them because, the caveat of the last Olympic medal was, there weren't NHL players, but now you have this opportunity in front of you. And I think that means a lot to them. And Slavkovsky did score a goal again today. He's got 4 in this tournament, now 11 in his Olympic career. So I think he's going to bring it. Slovaks also pulled Halavai after the 4th goal, and he was furious.
Yeah, he punched the glass. Did you see that?
I did see him punch the glass. I hope his hand's okay.
That's a rough move.
He actually was shaking it off after that. But and he had reason, like he got hung out to dry. Like, I mean, I understand the coach is trying to, get a change, try to change the momentum, do anything. But then I think the backup came in and let up a goal pretty quickly after that. So, in the end, Halavai should get the net again tomorrow and have an opportunity to be that guy. But when you're looking across the ice at a Finnish team that has, Mikko Rantanen and Miro Heiskanen and, the cast of characters that they have on that roster, it's going to be very difficult to get that second win. So, I'm not going to go ahead and hand the bronze medal to Finland right now, but I think that they would be the heavy favorites. And it's not just the fact that they have the deeper roster. It's also that they have even a few extra hours of rest. How many times have we seen the team that, had the quicker turnaround, had the tougher time in the game? It's pretty much happened every time.
This whole tournament, it has the whole tournament. Yeah. So which is kind of telling. Also, the favorites in a lot of the games have been winning since we saw the quarterfinals as a favorite sweep, and then same thing with the semis here. I would be interested to see how much the goalies on a lot of these teams between Binner didn't play nearly as much games, but Samuel Halavai has played a lot. And will he be playing a lot when he gets back the first 2 weeks into the AHL, or is he going to get an opportunity to go up to the big club at any point this year? We shall see. But maybe a trade deadline prospect. Who knows if people are going to be interested in calling his name, because he just showed he can really play against the top players in the world. So that's going to be something. That's just going to be something that gets talked about. I think between the injuries and just like the fatigue on players coming back, I think you might see some NHL teams kind of slump a little bit because their best players, like Florida, for example, has what was there? I think there were 6 guys, right, playing in in the Canada-Finland game.
Yeah, I think 5 of them started on the ice.
So like
in the opening faceoff.
So you have to think, is Florida going to have a slump when they get back? Because they've got some guys that have been resting, but their star guys are a little tired. Yeah, is that going to have an impact on the first 2 weeks of the NHL coming back to play? Who knows? Yeah,
it's going to be very, very interesting to see how that all shakes out. But before we move on from this, I did want to throw out a couple of quick stats, individual stats. Mm-hmm. And the first is Connor McDavid going into the gold medal game with 13 points, most points ever by a player in the NHL when the NHL has been in this. He surpassed Teemu Selanne, so maybe Teemu was a little bit hot from having his record broken. But McDavid has made a big impact. Here's another stat though: Macklin Celebrini 10 points so far in this tournament. Eric Lindros, who was 18, I believe, when he played in the Olympics, I think in 92. He had 11 points. And on the podcast I do with Cam Robinson, we said, could Celebrini hit 11? And I said, no way. And here we are 1 point away from doing that, because 11 was the record with NHL players. And we've got a 19-year-old doing that. So we are in the midst of an incredible Olympic run here for Canada. And then you also, on the other side, have Connor Hellebuck with a .947 save percentage to lead all goalies. So we've got some really good performances going in this one.
Yeah, and I think it should go stated as well that Safkovsky is already in the top 5 for scoring for Slovakia at the Olympics. He's got a bit of catch up to do, because Marian Hossa has, I believe, 28 Olympic points. But Safkovsky, at his age, if he continues to play, will surpass that record. But also, it's interesting. He's one of the few players that we have seen at the tournament that were able to play in a non-NHL and an NHL Olympics, which I think adds just a little bit more lore to his early career, being able to stand out that much.
No question.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot to be said, and we'll see what happens when the NHL gets back and how some of these players react, because also the disappointment coming back after a loss can kind of change the dynamic of a guy, and you've got to get some of these teams, shaken back in order. And some of these coaches also, like John Cooper, having to go back into the mix in Tampa Bay. You get resituated and get refocused and go. There's got to be a lot of just stuff at play this is a weird season. It'll probably be one of the weirder seasons that we see in the NHL, just with everything that's been going on with how tight the Eastern Conference is right now, where you actually have like zero idea who's going to be, making the playoffs, and you're going to have a pile of really good teams just barely miss. So it's a very weird NHL season. I don't know if this results in a Four Nations face-off next year, if we just all the theatrics, if they decide to go back, because All-Star games are dead. No one wants to watch them. So does this lead to Four Nations again? Like, what's going to happen? I know they talked about the World Cup of Hockey being an option. Like, are we going to see
that's
something?
back. I mean, that's announced. That's coming back in 2 years. So that'll be here. So we're going to have something, but I don't think it's going to match this at all.
No, I'd like to see another Four Nations face-off rather than an All-Star game, or just Canada versus USA in a game.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Super series.
So yeah, exactly. Right. It's something that we used to see in Major Junior all of the time. Or just, move the World Juniors into an NHL break, give the NHL guys 2 weeks off, and then we can all watch the World Juniors and have no NHL hockey on at the same time. And you can make all the best available young kids available to play in that. I've pitched that idea once before, but I don't think Gary's going to go for it. But after the break, and I have to share this unbelievable photo, we do have some more Olympic stuff to share with you, but we'll see you in a few.
Everyone knows that standing still doesn't get you where you want to go. It's all about movement and progression, power, safety, innovation, expertise. On the road, off the road, and down the road. You have to expect more out of yourself, and you should expect more of the company who makes your tires. Getting you more miles, traction, and safety is why we get up in the morning. Let's drive forward. Expect more. Fortune Tires.
back from the break, and we're going to go right into our Fortune Tire. The Fortune 4. Wow, as I absolutely butcher that. The players who drove the action on the ice. Didn't butcher that part. I have to go with Theodore after missing multiple shots to start the game. He gets that one, and it goes right in. He needed that. It was validation. This guy could have had 8 shots on net in this game. So I'm glad he was able to figure it out and get one. And then Nathan McKinnon, unbelievable performance. He played his mind out, and that's why he is part of my Fortune 4, and probably the worst photo I could have selected for him, Chris. But interesting, the Canadian guy picked Canadian people, and then you have your American Fortune 4.
Yeah, I'm going to start things off with Jack Hughes, 2 goals against Slovakia, just dancing through everybody, looking outstanding as he went through, drawing penalties and creating great opportunities for himself and his line mates. And then on top of that, you also got to give it up to Jack Eichel. He has been a driving force of the Tkachuk line. He is so good. 2 points again today, scored the goal that broke it wide open. He's been Team USA's #1 center and has looked great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hey, everyone kind of had just had one of those big possible days as they could. If either the United States kind of getting the goal train going, or if you're Canada, just finding a way to come back. Also, it should be noted, teams don't come back in the NHL Olympic games from down 2-0. And Canada was able to kind of make a little bit of history with that too. So that was neat. We talked about the ice, Chris, as being a continual factor. As you see at the end of the game, the ice held up. We're really just seeing issues around just the color of the blue around the goalies, because they don't have as much time to resurface this ice as you would if you were in the NHL, where you'd have a whole evening and then the ice would be ready for the following day. You have just a couple hours between the games. So the ice has actually held up. We haven't heard a lot of complaints from anybody about what's gone on. Gary Bettman did kind of say that this was just acceptable enough, but they're trust me, they're going to be more involved in the next Olympics that happens to ensure that these standards are set the way that they would like for them to be. And I know they talked about playing in a soccer pitch and having the temporary setup there.
Oh, it's happening.
It's one of those things where I go, oh God, they're just trying to add more potential problems into it, because how do they climatize that properly to have the volume of games they need to see? And in a soccer pitch, how is anybody going to be close enough to the ice? Really, it's that's a problem. No matter where you put it, you still don't have great sight lines.
Yeah, I mean, the renderings that I've seen have said that they're going to be, they're going to have temporary stands that are closer to the action and things like that. The capacity for those is going to be much lower than the actual soccer stadium itself. But, I do think, and I believe it's a domed stadium as well on top of that. So, but we'll see. It's one of those things. They're trying to do things for sustainability and other things like that. You also go back to like when the Milan Olympics were started, there was the COVID situation where they couldn't break ground for a long enough time. And then they probably broke ground later than they should have, even amid all of those. So, so I think that that's a really difficult, it's a difficult thing to kind of plan for. But in the end, I think that we've got some really great, the way that the players that have managed kind of locker rooms that aren't up to NHL standards and, weird hops and different things. There were a couple of sticks that got jammed in boards today that looked like they were going to stay there for a little bit. But, those are the things that you kind of deal with. And I think the biggest thing that I've taken away is that you hear from the players, and they have limited their complaints. They have limited their negativity, and really except towards the referees at this point.
Yeah, that's a good transition point too.
That's been pretty good to see. And I think that's because this opportunity means so much to those players.
Yeah.
And then that's a big thing.
Yeah, so we talked about it before, but I would love to see the top European referees moved over to the AHL and the NHL, so then we can have a final between Canada and the United States officiated by like 2 Swedes and a Finn and maybe a guy from like Denmark, just to remove the nonsense and the whiny, complainy stuff. I get that the linesmen are going to have less of an impact on the game, but still, if they're needing an additional opinion on what happened on something, just make it a Swedish guy if you're going to have Canada versus the United States. And I think that they should really look at this. The NHL does a better job with the referees than we see in the NFL and all the problems they have there. But the development system for officiating, really, it would be great if we could just grab a few of those guys and start to develop them further for this exact purpose, where we have these big games and we don't want to have people talking about bias or anything like Teemu Selanne did, or, the Czechia's coach, or Joel Armia's comments, even though they weren't super strong in terms of how negative they were. It's just, let's not give fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. And I think that, as we progress, that'll change. I mean, I think, and I think as emotions subside, I mean, it's hard. It just means so much to these guys. You understand that, like, every little thing, they've been waiting for this. And we say, well, it happens every 4 years, but these guys have not even had the chance to play in the Olympics over the last 8 or 12 years rather. So, I think it's really there's just so much riding on it. And I think that everything was heightened in this one. And I do think that as we go forward, it's going to be, it's going to become more of the norm, and guys are going to accept those things. But I mean, yeah, you just see how much the Olympics means to these players.
And it's the Olympics, we've mostly just talked about hockey, you and I, on the show, but the Olympics is a lot more than just that, where you see some of this crazy aerial things. We also saw a severe injury on the short track for speed skating today. A lot does go into it outside of just the hockey. So I can understand that there's priorities and other things have to be taken care of too. But the IIHF, there's opportunities for them to, I think, nail this down a little bit. In the same way that you see the NHL, they have specific crews that start working once playoffs hit because they want everything done the right way. But tomorrow, guys, make sure to tune in because we're going to have our bronze medal recap. And also, we will talk about Canada-USA in a little bit more depth. But appreciate everybody tuning in. And we have some AHL hockey coming to you later today.
Inside the blue line.
Along the wall. Centering pass off a skate. Long ahead this goes. Breakaway. Going in. Byro. Scores.
We'll play some hockey, eh? Hockey. We're going to play hockey today.
Yano for it. He'll wrap a shot and a goal. And gets his first goal of the season. Floating out of the air. Wow. Going in. Wow. Shoot.
Crowd already engaged here tonight inside the blue line.
Along the wall. Centering pass off a skate. Long ahead this goes. Breakaway. Going in. Byro.